Hey everyone, I'm Emerald and you are watching Lumber Capital Log Yard. Here at our sawmill, we specialize in hemlock lumber, but we cut all different kinds of species, including hardwoods, as well as pine and basswood. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about the pros and cons of using hemlock in your building projects. So hopefully this will help you guys decide if you're in the middle of a project and you're trying to decide what species of lumber to use, because this is a very important decision. Hopefully this will help you determine and make an educated decision. So let's get into this video. I'm gonna first start out with the pros of using hemlock. My first one is going to have to be that it is a great substitute for hardwood. Now don't get me wrong, you still need hardwood. You need it for trailer bedding mostly. You can't really swap hemlock for hardwood anytime, but sometimes you can. And the reason why this would be beneficial is because of the price difference. Anytime you're going to go and buy hardwood, it's going to be significantly more expensive than buying softwood. But the reason why I say that you can substitute it for hardwood is because it is actually, for a softwood, incredibly strong. For strength-wise, it's more on the hardwood spectrum, even though it is a softer wood. So that is the reason why I say you can substitute it. But like I said, be cautious about this because you can't do that every time. So my second pro, which kind of relates to my first one, is that it has good weight per density. It is pretty light and it also is strong. So that's why I again say that it can be a great substitute for hardwoods depending on what you're using it for, because it is lighter to use. And so stuff like siding where you're lifting it up and you're doing a lot of manual work with it, it's way easier to use. I know that your contractors, if you're paying somebody to put siding up for you, they're going to appreciate a lighter wood because it's just that much easier. It is not, however, light coming off the mill. When it's green, it's heavy, and that is because it is very porous. Now, there are pros and cons to it being as porous as it is. One being that it takes in stain very well, so it's great if you want to stain it. It really just gives it it's absolutely beautiful. Stained hemlock is absolutely gorgeous. Now, why would it being porous have anything to do with its weight? That is because when it comes off the mill, it is green, so it is full of moisture. It is literally dripping with wetness, so that is why after it dries out, it becomes a lot lighter. But because it's so porous, it's kind of like a sponge and it just kind of sucks up that water. Same with the stain, or if you're painting it, it just wants to suck it in. And so like I said, it can be good or bad, just depending on what you're using it for. Another thing is a lot of people like how it ages. It's not like pine, whereas it comes off super white off the mill and then really grays out the more it sits in the sun. Hemlock is very similar, but it has a little bit different of a shade to it. It has this like reddish brown hue to it once it gets a little bit dried out. It does come off. If you take a look here, this is newer stuff off the mill, and then this is some older stuff. You can see the color difference. It kind of gets this nice yellow tint to it that makes it almost look like it was stained. So a lot of people like that. It just depends on your taste. The one reason why people seek hemlock so much is for its bug and rot resistant properties. I know I've obviously talked a lot about this on our channel because this is the main attribute of hemlock, because there is still 100-year-old barns with original hemlock siding on it that is in pretty good shape. So that is why so many people seek hemlock for siding, is because it lasts for a very long time, and because it's wood, even if a piece doesn't, all it takes is getting another piece and replacing it. It isn't some cheap plastic that you have to redo the whole thing to replace one piece. Now, I have heard people disagree with the rot and bug resistant properties of it. I have heard people say that it's not, but obviously it would also depend on your climate. If you live in a swamp, I think any kind of wood would rot in that environment anyhow, so it really doesn't matter how resistant your wood is to rotting. If you live in a swamp, you're going to expect that to happen. So I guess as a disclaimer, I am not going to say that it is a proven fact that 100% your hemlock will not rot, because it is wood. It doesn't last forever. But as far as this species of wood compared to others, it has been known to stand up to the test of time very well. Now for the cons, right? You can't have the good without the bad. Some cons of hemlock is, again, I know I've already touched on it being porous, but that also makes it a weaker wood and makes it not really suitable for stuff like furniture or something that needs to be rock hard with no holes. It is a little bit spongy when it comes to that. And when I say spongy, don't get me wrong, it's still pretty hard, all right? It's still a good substitute for hardwood in certain circumstances, but it can be a little bit porous. Hemlock is also notorious for having a lot of shake. This is just something that happens. It's the way that the tree grows, whether a tree has shake in it or not. It's not something that us as millers can really control, but when you cut into a log, sometimes it's just cracked, and sometimes it can have something that is more like a precursor to a crack, that the more you look at it, at wood coming off the mill, the more you'll be able to spot, hey, this board down the road, after it's dried, it's gonna have a crack in it. And I'll show you what I mean here. This 1x3 probably came off the mill pretty much perfect, but you can see as it's dried out a little bit, shrunken maybe, it has a huge crack in it. So this piece is basically trash, but you can see what I mean here by this piece probably came off the mill just fine, and over time it did develop a crack in it. What I oftentimes see is just this little dark line that runs through the wood, and it's basically just like a little tiny bit of rot just running down a line, and that is a soft point in the wood that will eventually crack once it dries out. As far as it shrinking, it doesn't shrink a ton, not compared to pine, which shrinks majorly. I've seen it literally shrink like a ½ inch by the time it's done drying out. So there is a little bit of shrinkage, but it's not crazy compared to other species. Because hemlock is an evergreen, you can expect that there are going to be a lot of knots, because if you've ever seen any kind of pine or hemlock, they have a lot of branches. Now, obviously, there's going to be more branches the farther up the tree that you go, but basically what I see when I see a knot is a weak point in the wood. Now, it can be used just fine, especially for stuff like siding. It doesn't really matter if there's a knot in it at all, but what you do want to watch out for is a knot that goes all the way across, because chances are your board is probably going to break at that point. So it is a weak spot, and there are a lot of knots in hemlock compared to hardwood, but in all, just depending on what you're using it for, it doesn't usually matter that much. That's it for today's video, you guys. I hope that you enjoyed. If you did, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.